Okay. Nobody's here yet, so I'm talking to myself as usual. But at least the session is running. So as usual, I have to orient myself first because this is a bit confusing. Having 5 windows that's, feed each other. So, someone is there. Jan Mattis, of course he is. Hi. So, 3 waiting. Very nice. So it seems like I have actually 3 viewers. Brilliant. So I would say, since it's not 6 yet, we still wait for a little bit. Hi Max, how's it going? Every time I'm afraid that I'm sitting here alone. So thanks very much. Yes, there is a delay. Quite a big one, unfortunately. I'm not sure why that is, but it's something between 5 and 10 seconds, so it's quite long. Because I guess it has to go through the YouTube server. And yeah, that is really annoying, that delay. But since when I look at the YouTube kind of feedback window, I can see that there's a delay directly in YouTube. So I don't think there's anything I can do about it. Because basically I can see what I'm currently streaming, and then I see what arrives at YouTube, and there's a massive delay between it. Just something I guess you have to get used to. Cool. Yeah, Max says he's currently learning Vex. I mean, there are more good sources for this, but I think the chapter on the website is actually pretty good to get the most important bits. But then, of course, there's an endless source of knowledge out there from CG Wiki and so on. Oh, Moment just came just from work. Thanks very much. Appreciate it. So I think we can slowly start. And as usual, what I was... Oh, first of all, before I move on, and actually, damn it, I failed. So how do I do this? I can turn off the screen for a second. Sorry about that. But the reason is I have to move through my desktops, which on Linux you have multiple ones of, to grab my Discord window. So now I'm back. There you go. Because what I wanted to say is there is a hashtag live session channel on the Discord server. So you can ask your questions here in YouTube, but you can also ask them on the Discord server. The advantage of the Discord server is that you can actually post links. So that's why I this time have 2 text channels, basically. So it's up to you what you want and what you need. So before we move on, I want to start with updates. So in terms of videos, no, actually, let's start with the elephant in the room, because just an hour ago I updated the design of the website, and I'm pretty happy with this. But I'm absolutely dependent on your feedback. So this is the old design as you know it, and thankfully I still had this window open from during the day, so I can directly compare it, and this is how it looks now. And I think you can see it's much slicker now. So before 2000s and 2023. So yeah, I hope it is actually an improvement. So if there's anything that doesn't work for you or anything that feels worse than before in any kind of way, please feel free to give feedback. I'm very open to that, ideally on the Discord server. And then, we can talk about it and see what other people think and so on. But I think it's quite nice. At least it feels a bit more modern, that's for sure. And a couple of interesting functionality improvements are in there as well. One of the things that I will keep improving, of course, it's the first iteration, but you have now some kind of dashboard. So that means you, when you're not watching a video, which also happens when you just click on a chapter, you get the dashboard page. And there you get a couple of informations like the last watched video, the next video, so they can instantly jump in if you just logged in. And then also the progress, also in my case, because I'm jumping around, of course, the progress per chapter. So you can see, you know, where stuff is missing, and here, up here, there is currently the overall progress. And then, just because I wanted to fill the screen a little bit, actually, yeah, let me finish this first. You have now the last 5 bookmarks visible here as well. So if you have any idea what else you would like to see on your dashboard, I'm sure there are many possible things you could do this. Just let me know. I'm open for ideas. It's just the first iteration. So yeah. Cool. So that is that. The update on the design. Hopefully everybody's happy with that. Then I did, oops, wrong one. Then I think the biggest, I did a little bit of update on this video here. I mean, last time was 13, so I did a little bit. So the Fill a Cup Vellum video is updated mainly because it was really old. And while doing it, I realized, well, most of the stuff I was looking at, you already should have known when you watched the videos before. So I turned it into a homework video. So the next thing is the fireplace. Finally, that took me over a year actually, but you know, pyro and flip is always the most work intensive stuff. But thankfully, I think it came out quite nice. The fireplace now has an updated lighting, shading, and rendering video. It's still rendered in Mantra, so it's not Solaris, because I decided, okay, it's already 20 minutes long, and I don't, you know, 20 minutes is already pretty high. I don't want the videos to be too long, but I'm pretty sure you could apply the techniques yourself in Solaris. It might be a good homework for you. So then that's actually what I wanted to show you. Well, before, let's do a small one. And I also updated the water sphere and the water spiral video. Those were 2 videos before. Now they're 1, because basically it's the same technique, and having 2 videos for such really special and exotic use case for the ocean spectrum felt a little bit odd. So I combined it in one and yeah, streamlined it a little bit. So, and this one is actually one that made a lot of work, mainly because it meant I had to find a lot of material and research. And this is the career and showreel advice. It was about time that I finally upload this video. And not only is this video interesting, but also the links on the side where you can learn even more about this. And I put this into the bonus material, and mainly the reason is it can be a little bit frustrating listening to this because, you know, as you probably know, I'm not sugarcoating. I'm always telling you how I think the things are. And that often means that includes not so great things. And that in this case means I'm basically saying how much work it is to create a show reel. And honestly, I want to be honest here, I didn't want to put this into the introduction because before people even start learning Houdini, I don't want to pull them off by telling them how hard it is to create this first show reel. So I put it in the bonus material so that it's not too discouraging. For everyone else who already is in the video, in the course, you know where to find it because you will find it under the changelog anyway. So that much about the updates. I think I didn't forget anything. No, those were the most important things. So it's time for questions. So the first question from George Lee, sorry if I pronounced this wrong. I'm lucky enough to have a very international audience, but that often means I can't pronounce the names. So Rebel Way, yeah, I don't want to be too unfair, to be honest, because, you know, I don't want to talk bad about the competition, but I have a mixed opinion about Rebel Way. First of all, let's start with the good things. I think the free stuff they give out on YouTube and so on their website is actually really good. I'm constantly surprised how good the quality is for the fact that they give it out for free. So definitely check this out. It's a great source of knowledge because these people are definitely pros. So they absolutely know what they're doing. The problem I have with Rebelway, and I think I said this before, is how they market their material. And to understand this, all you have to do is just go to the website and see what they, I mean, this is kind of fine, but yeah, this stuff. The problem is that these kind of shots that they show here are on a level that usually a junior effects study is not supposed to do. They are way too big. And no studio would expect this kind of size. I'm not talking about the quality, I'm talking about the size from a junior. So here, those really movie kind of, let me see if I find another one. There was also this channel video. So these scales here, those are great. This is a scale where I say, great. This is, no, not this one. So smaller scale, that's always something I recommend for beginners, because for a beginner, it's all about quality, not size. The problem is when you start with a scale like this is that most beginners don't have the resources to pull this off, because just the simulation and render time, sorry about that, you know the drill, my camera turns off occasionally. The resources you need for simulation and rendering is way too high for what most juniors can actually handle. So if you need a simulation of 8 hours for one iteration and a rendering of 45 minutes, and we talked about a similar thing last time, then there's simply not enough iteration a junior can do. And then what this results in is mediocre quality. So my biggest problem is here the scale. And the fact that they show these shots, which in my opinion a beginner is not able to do, to sell the idea that they can learn what it takes to do this. The problem is those are done by professionals who are working in this industry for many, many years, and they know how to properly animate a camera. They know how lighting and shading works. So in this shot, there is experience of, you know, when you combine it of multiple people, probably something like 20 or 30 years of experience. And that's not fair. I don't think that's fair to sell this to a beginner as if a beginner would be able to learn this in, let's say, 3 weeks or something like that. And that's my main problem with Rebelway. They promise too much. And this actually is a topic I'm talking about as well in the showreel video. Because in the showreel video, one of the important things I am talking about is where is it? Here, big isn't always good. That's one of the most important things I always tell beginners. Be careful with the scale. Do quality, not size. So here are a couple of examples actually that are not that great. I want to be careful a little bit with showing this publicly because people can get offended, even though technically it's allowed to use that for educational purposes. But watch the video if you have access to the site where I show a couple of examples where you can see big shots are not always good and good shots don't have to be big. So let's keep it at that. Is it possible to make your camera larger? Well, sure, but I mean, you mean make myself larger? Here we go. Hi. So yeah, if you want, but I don't think it's about me. It's the idea is that I can show stuff, and yeah, fair enough. Oh, you mean during the no, during the stream? You mean? Okay, yeah. Marcus is saying that. Fair enough. Here, is subsolvers like Pyro, RBD, Vellum used in production? Yes, of course. Yes. Short answer. Well, let me make sure that I keep putting the questions into the question box like this. Are subsolvers like Pyro, RBD, and Vellum and Flip used in production? Yes. Well, with one exception, Flip. Flip is so new; it's not even 6 months old. The Flip sub, and that's one reason why people don't use it, because you have to understand that in studios, they usually don't use the latest version of Houdini. And that is because every project keeps the version of Houdini that it started with. This is a very important thing to keep in mind. When you have a production, you should usually not change the version of the software you're using. And that means that in production, when a project finishes, it's usually something like 6 months or 1 year or even 3 months old only, but it's multiple months old, that project, since it started, and you usually use therefore an outdated, so to say, Houdini version. And that means most people that I talked to didn't even have the chance to use the latest Flipsop, because they were simply all on projects that didn't use the latest Houdini version 19.5. Besides that, when they asked me if they should upgrade their version, because thankfully they can ask me that, because it's my job basically to be up to date, and they are not always up to date, which is totally fine in production, by the way. So in production, you do not need to know the latest techniques as long as you can finish the job. And you would be surprised how few people in the industry are actually really up to date with the latest techniques, including Houdini people and techniques in Houdini. So anyway, that's why they often ask me, because it's my job to actually, be up to date with those. And I recommended to go to the newest version because what was it? I like the resizing technique for Pyro. So in Pyro, you can now, what's it called? Grid size or something? Let me quickly actually start Houdini and have a look. And this is why, by the way, I don't like to have my face so big, because Houdini is more important. Where was I? Let me quickly check what it's called in Pyro. What I really like. There's a video about it, but yeah. And what I said is that the flip solver, in my opinion, is not good. And everybody who is following me a little bit knows that I'm not a big fan of the new flip setup. So here the no, is it? Yes, that is the velocity voxel scale. So basically, it's an additional multiplier for the scale only of the velocity field, which, as we know, is the most important volume in the whole Pyro setup. And the interesting thing is, if you scale this up, then the amount of voxels will be less, and that will speed up the calculation time. And in many cases, especially when you don't have very fine details, so certain smoke, for example, that is very kind of blurry and diffuse, doesn't need that high detail, then you can actually increase this by quite a lot, which speeds up the simulation without losing quality. So I'm a big fan of this. This is really great. What I'm not a big fan of is the flip solver yet. I mean, this will probably change, so don't get me wrong. I'm not against it per se. I'm just saying it's not there yet. And that is mainly because it's very slow. And the problem is, I don't care if something is 20% slower when the overall speed was already high. But flip, by definition almost, is extremely slow if you want to use it in production. And I only care about production. I'm not caring about playing around in my free time. My question is this thing suitable for production? And if it's in basically every case that I tested slower than a manual setup, which is already slow, then in my opinion, it's not useful. And therefore, there is no point in basically focusing on it too much, when in production, it's not actually something I would use myself. That's my argument. That said, of course, this will probably change. It's the first version, and there's nothing wrong with not being the best yet. But as long as that hasn't changed, I don't recommend it. So, long winding answer to a simple question. Generally, yes, but in the case of flip, the answer is no. All right, so now I made my face smaller again. Let's make it bigger again, because Mark asked for it. So, hi Christian. So let's see what is actually going on the Discord server. There you go. So Adam is posting his reel. So Adam, be aware, if you, anyway, for everyone, if you post your reel, again, I'm not sugarcoating. So yeah, don't be offended if I say what I'm thinking, but that said, I doubt that Adam doesn't want to show what he did. So all comp in Nuke, half is in Maya, half is in Houdini. Let me actually quickly change the question to real feedback. Adam Bunker. There you go. So that everybody can see on the stream then later what all of this is about. At this point, I'm more of a generalist than an effects artist. I would like to eventually become an effects TD. What skills in particular would you recommend me to develop more based on the real? Good question. Let's see. Without sound, of course, and let's go. Wait, let me actually start at the very beginning. Okay, for some reason there is no title. Oh, wait a minute. Now my head is in the way. There you go. There's no title, which is not a big deal, but I would recommend having a front title where all your contact data is in. Yeah, you can tell this is obviously a generalist reel because there's a lot more work going on than just effects, which is not a bad thing per se, but we'll talk about this in a second. That's nice. I like that. Let me watch it first, just, you know, maybe comment here and there for the first impressions, but then I will go deeper into this after I've seen it. Is that a render? Yeah, it seems like to be a render. Nice. Well done. Yeah, I mean, obviously it's a pretty good reel. That's clear. Can you give a little bit of your background for everyone else, Adam? So are you a beginner or are you in the industry for a while already? Because that looks like you have some years of experience, obviously. Probably all, I mean, I kind of remember your name, but maybe that's from the website. Ah, here, and here are the contact information at the end. Nothing wrong with that. Usually I like to have it in the very beginning because when people kind of liked your reel and then they want to go back to it, having as soon as they found your reel, having the first information, your contact information, is pretty helpful. So that's would be my argument. You don't want to go to the back to find the contact data. Another thing is, let's start with those technicalities first. After your contact data, it's now black. That's not good because what purpose does it serve here? Keep the contact data till the end and again add it at the beginning, and this black at the end makes no sense. Maybe there is some technical reasons for you, but in the context of YouTube, that's not necessarily a good idea. So let me first start with a general thing, which I see often with beginners, even the good ones. And that is the whole problem with here see two versions of that. First of all, you called yourself in the text a generalist, sorry. And the problem with generalist is generally that there is no job in VFX, to my knowledge, that is a generalist in the way that someone who covers everything. That doesn't exist. That's not what a generalist means. A generalist usually covers a certain area of multiple departments. For example, a creature artist takes care of let's say the design, the modeling, and to a certain extent the effects of a creature. So, and only creatures. That's would be still called a generalist because he or she covers multiple departments. Another very common example is environment artists. Environment artists are generalists because they have to know multiple things. They need to know about modeling, they need to know about shading and lighting, and procedural modeling and stuff like that. But still, you would not expect, let's say, animation or rigging from an environment artist. So the term generalist, you should not take literally. You should understand or decide what that means for you. What kind of generalist do you want to be? And the problem with this reel here is that I couldn't actually tell you what your speciality here is. You're right, you are a generalist, but the problem is if I would have to hire you, I wouldn't really know what I put you in, where you would feel comfortable or where you would be usable at your best. And even though you might now say, well, then just hire me and I will do whatever you want, but that's not how it works. Because if there are multiple people where basically psychologically I can clearly say, okay, this is a professional for this area, then I don't have to put any more work into this question than I already did. I hire this person and things are clear. If I have a generalist and I feel like I have to first figure out what to do with him or her, then that's more work for the HR. And usually that's not a good idea. I hope you understand what I mean. To be fair, it can be an advantage to be generalist for certain very small studios. So the smaller the studio, the more people are happy with generalists who have a very wide knowledge. But I'm usually talking about mid-sized to big studios, not the small ones. So in the same vein, you call yourself here a 3D VFX artist. That job doesn't exist. So I would be very careful with this, because for me, that tells me you do not know what you're actually doing. The VFX artist is not a job description. It's just an umbrella term of multiple departments. So I know it can be painful having to decide what department you want to work in. I understand that completely, because we do this out of passion. But for a pure career advice, I would highly recommend making that decision, because it will make it so much easier for you to actually apply your knowledge in the industry. And if you still want to do, be creative, you can do this in your spare time. I do this myself. I still have personal projects where I, do everything from A to B, but that's not the same as what I do in my job. So, okay, so now with all this out of the way, let's get to the feedback. I think the quality is pretty high, definitely. There is a strong here, this shot is great, and it's a good idea to put this pretty early in your reel. Great lighting, great shading, great modeling, great cinematography overall, the framing and all that, very nice. I really like it. Sure, there's always something you could criticize, but overall for a junior reel, if that's what it is, it's pretty compelling. What I like about this shot in terms of, in the context of an effects study, even though that's not an effects reel, this has context. And this is what I see all the time. People make effects in front of black or in front of some gray nothing. So just the effect. And yes, that is not per se bad. But personally, I think it's always better to put your effects in some kind of concrete, I'm not sure if you can use that word in English, but you know what I mean, some specific context, because it's then kind of showing, okay, this is someone who understands what we're doing. We are creating content, not just something to look at. So this is great. I really like that this has a context here. So this is a bit dark. If you're here, I would definitely like to see a breakdown, because here it's very hard for me to actually tell what am I looking at. Is the background footage? I think it is. Then actually the shot isn't great, but I can't tell what I'm actually looking at, because it's not clear what you actually did on this. That's general actually feedback. Put in at least a small explanation of what you did here, even if it's just in form of text. So if you look at my reel, you can see all those things, some of the things I mentioned. First of all, it starts with the contact information, and it also ends with the context information until the last frame. And whenever I show something down here in a very ugly way, I have to agree, it's not great, it's not well done, but at least there is some explanation of what we're looking at. And even better, of course, is some kind of breakdown if you can. So this, unfortunately, this is very old, this reel. It hurts me. I have to update it, but thankfully as a senior artist, you don't need a reel that much anymore, because people, know that you know what you're doing. But as a junior, a reel is essential. So this is the problem I have with this shot. There is no context for me. This is a great shot. I want to know more about this. I guess it's just a crowd sim. Looks great. I love it. I just love this shot, because it has context, it has great lighting, it has a great mood, which I always appreciate. I really like it. It's great. Again, this is a bit dark, but yeah. Oh, again, yeah, actually, again, it's an effects shot. And then all of a sudden there is a shadow, which tells me, great, there's context. This is not just an effect for the sake of it, but there's actually a reason why it was created. Same with this. I mean, assuming this is actually from a short movie, but it's great. It's great. Even if you don't have a short movie connected to your shots, kind of pretend you had. Like, think about in what context could you create an effect that could be part of a story. And then all of a sudden you give the impression that you actually, you know, understand what you're doing in this job, because at the end of the day, we're always supposed to tell a story. That's the whole reason we do shit. Okay. So yeah, that's my feedback. It's not an effects reel, it's a generalist reel, but I think actually surprisingly that's problematic. If you know, without any constraints or any context, if someone would ask me what's the closest kind of department reel this is, or what department would this apply to the most, I would say lighting, actually. Lighting and shading. Because what you show here is a good, with the exception of this shot maybe, a good understanding, this shot again is great, of cinematic lighting. And the thing is, I started as a generalist actually, because I didn't understand all those things. And they put me, in every company I applied to, into the lighting department. And this is maybe a positive thought about the whole generalist thing. The fact that you have a lot of knowledge besides lighting is actually great, because that's what a good lighter needs. Because basically a lighter gets all the 3D data at the end of the production, well, in the middle of the production and the beginning of the production, but at the end of the pipeline. The animation, the modeling, and everything comes together at the table of the lighter before it goes to comp. So understanding more about the whole pipeline than the average artist is very helpful as a lighter, to be able to give feedback, to be able to fix certain things, maybe yourself. And this is why being a generalist is really valuable to be a lighter. So this would be my feedback. I think this is a lighting reel. All right, is there anything else I want to mention that is important here? Or maybe environment. Yeah, that could be another thing. But if you really wanted to be an effects TD, then I would concentrate more on actual effects, which is painful probably, because you have so many great shots that are not effects based. But if you really want to be an effects TD, then yeah, of course, put more effects stuff in. So I hope this is helpful. I hope I didn't forget anything crucial, which I probably will realize an hour after after the stream. But let's move on. So 2 other people posted their reel, which is great. Thanks very much. Before I jump on that, let me quickly check the chat. Tips for a fall off for something that is activated by an integer. Oh boy. No. I would have to think too much about this for this. So Jan Mattes, contact me directly. We know each other, so ask me again. I have right now I can't tell you. I would have to think about this. So yeah, so a lot of good feedback for Adam's reel for good reasons. So Adam, great reel. Just, you know, again, a couple of things to keep in mind, but you know, in terms of skills and the effort that it needs to create this reel, it's obvious that, you know, you should not have a problem finding your way. The big question is, what is it that you want, right? Okay, let's move on. The next one was Shama, who was Mohamed Shama. I hope I again pronounced that correctly. So let's go there. So let me quickly change. I want to make sure that I actually put the names in correctly, because that's always probably a good thing. 1 second. So here is the question bar, and there is your name. Yeah, okay. So we have the name on the screen, and let's go. Okay, like I said, I'm not a big fan of big shots, and this challenge particularly, that's what I meant shortly with a side note, is something I find very problematic from Rebel Way, kind of giving people without experience, oh, here's a massive shot that a senior artist would work weeks and months on. Have fun. I don't like that. I think that's a really problematic thing. So the scale here is my biggest problem. Same with this one. To be fair though, before I keep complaining about the scale, I have to admit your execution is pretty good for that. I still think it's not the wisest choice, but at least you did the best you could, and the quality is somewhat higher than average. And this is a great shot. And I think here you can see this is a smaller shot. The smallest shot so far, in my opinion, is your best shot. And this, I think, is not a coincidence. I think that is just what I was talking about. I mean, this is still big, don't get me wrong. Yes, that's not a small thing, but it's still the smallest of all your shots. And I think it was the best. So let's have a look at it again. First of all, yes, you have all your data in here. This is great. You are very specific. You're an effects artist, and that's what you want to do. You know, the design choice here for the effects show reel, that's up to you. I don't want to comment on that. I mean, we don't have to follow all the same rules. I think it's fine. The first impression of this shot here is great. To be fair, yeah, I don't want to talk badly about this. But the problem is now you are basically opening a can of worms, because you now open, or you create an expectation that you have to now fulfill. And especially when I look here, when I look at the flip simulation, and before I say anything, I can imagine how painful this was. Just simulating this, just looking at it makes me want to cry. I wouldn't want to simulate this if I wouldn't have to. So this is really painful, and I can see how much work that is. At the same time, I don't think it's particularly successful, because what's lacking here, and this frame I think shows it best, if you have a scale like this, then you need to show the same level of detail that a shot on this size actually implies. And you can see here that on the details of the water, this is not there. The detail is missing. A couple of other things: if you do a flip simulation, it's not enough to have a flip simulation and a little bit of white water. I want to see more than that covers the context of what you're doing here. One thing that I'm absolutely missing is, why is the monster dry? Why is there not a wet map? Why is there no water flying off the monster? Why is there no stuff flying around? I think there's another thing I just realized: there is no motion blur on the fluids. So many things that I would now expect you to do right if you yourself decide you want to go this route, that I think that's very problematic, because you're basically fighting against a too big opponent. Almost literally here. And this is a problem I have with this. And I think, yeah, it depends a little bit of who watches it, but I personally would say I see this as a critical decision to ignore all these obvious problems for the sake of just showing something big. I think that's all I want to say. So that's here's another thought I had. As I started talking about the wet maps, I was talking about, you know, water that flies around and all these secondary simulations, and that's also very important. That's another thing I'm talking about shortly in the showreel video. Don't forget that it's not just about the main simulation you're showing. The same amount of care should go into the secondary simulations that are connected to it. So again, for example, take care of the water that's flying from the monster, which is not a flip simulation necessarily, which can be procedurally. And these things, the attention to detail, to all the small details that you could add on top of the simulation, that's what a professional looks for. It's not just about the main simulation. And one other thought about this: I know that in my course, I'm only talking about a single simulation at a time. That's because it's a fundamentals course. It's not a course that teaches you how to do showreel shots. It's just giving you the baseline, the fundamentals, the base framework of understanding the basics of Houdini, so that you can then go further from there. So I'm not claiming that what you learn in the course is enough to actually do a compelling effects reel. So moving on, this one is better, and I'm not sure where the simulation comes from. Actually, now here I can see it. That's fair. So here we go. You have a good explanation here. Water effects, dust, debris. Yeah. So what's nice about this shot is here, this is a level of detail that matches with the scale. So basically in your own reel, you're showing how it has to look like. And in the shot before, basically what was missing in this shot. And that is the detail level. So that's interesting. But at least in this regards, this shot, in my opinion, is more successful because it's in itself has fewer problems. So let's say it like that. So let's move on. I'm taking too long for these things. I'm sorry. You know how I am. I keep talking about anything for 20 minutes easily. So here I actually like the explosion quite a lot, even though I think it's not a good choice. The shot is not a good choice. It's in front of black. It has no context. It's a building, which, you know, an office building, which is kind of always kind of triggering me a little bit. But that said, the explosion is actually pretty good. I really like the detail in the explosion and the secondaries. So the debris, not the debris, the embers, or however you want to call it, the way the first frames look like, the detail in the smoke, well executed, I have to say. And my camera is dying once again. So well executed, the explosion is well executed, but the context isn't really convincing. So here, the shading is great. I really like the shading, but I'm not a massive fan of the explosion, mainly because it lacks detail in the first part. And I'm not talking about the fine detail. I'm talking about this massive swirl, which I find not very convincing. And also those big turbulences in the trails. They look a bit lackluster to me. I think it needs more detail. That said, the detail that then comes in the smoke is great. So I would try to get the same amount of detail in the beginning or in the middle as you have in the end. However you want to do that, but you know, that's just my feedback. But it's not a bad shot by any means. It's a pretty good beginner shot for sure. But generally, I think you have to be careful with your scales. And this one is great. The only problem I have with this, and by the way, the wet maps are great. That's exactly what I'm talking about. If I see water, I want to have wet maps. So basically, you solve all the criticism I had on the first shot in the later shots, which is funny. What I'm not super happy with here is the white water. And just to be clear, white water is really tricky to get right. So I don't blame you for having this very foamy look to it. And partly that's also the way I describe it in the course. That said, that video I will actually take down. It's a bit outdated. And actually I realize it's actually too advanced for a fundamentals course. So if that is based on the tutorials on the website, I apologize. But still, I find the white water too foamy, too volumetric. It feels like foam and not like white water. And I'm not saying that is easy or that I know instantly how to do it better. But if I remember correctly, the best approach, and just find other sources of information about this because there are plenty of good tutorials about it. I think the best approach is a mixture between volumes and particles, but I'm not 100% sure. Good, so I hope this was somewhat helpful and still fair. Yeah, so Mohamed gives me feedback. Sorry, now that I read it. Thank you, Chris. I totally agree, but this is something I learned the hard way, to focus on secondaries in my learning. Totally fair. I understand. And don't get me wrong, any kind of criticism is always, you know, in goodwill. So I'm pretty sure you realized it yourself. So, okay, so we agree. Great. Nothing wrong with that. So next one. Hi, Chris, from Faris Aprilio, or Faris Aprilio, I'm sorry. Here it is. I think that's the right name, right? Faris Aprilio. Let me quickly fix that in the name. At least I assume that this makes the most sense name-wise. Quickly before we move on, right. Kalash says that he likes the pyro sauce bread. Kalash, quick question. Do you mean the videos on my YouTube channel, or have you also access to my website? Because on the website, there are much more videos than on my YouTube channel. Those are just samples. On the website, where I have over 400 videos. So if you say you would like to have more videos, just check out Houdini-course.com, and then you have 399 more. How do you manage to only work half a year directly in the industry and do the rest of your own? Well, simply because my website brings in enough money that I can afford that. That's it. So I'm lucky, and that was actually the plan, that I earn enough money with teaching and with the website that I only have to work 6 months a year. How you can manage to do this, everybody has to find their own way, but that's how I manage to do that. Do I constantly change companies? Yes, at some point, just to be fair, not as a beginner. As a beginner, you should maybe stay in a company for at least a year to kind of, absorb as much knowledge as possible. But later on, when you are more experienced, yes, jumping around companies is not a big deal, because then you can work as a freelancer and people will hire you for shorter gigs. That said, I never worked in film because of that, because in film, you usually do not get hired for short term. You not get hired for a month or two. You usually get hired for at least a year, and usually not as a freelancer. So it depends a little bit where you work, and I'm not working in movies for quite some time anymore. I mainly work for TV series and commercials mostly, because there you get employed or hired as a freelancer for much shorter times, and then jumping around is totally possible and not a problem at all. Cool. Yeah, Kalash said he actually meant the YouTube channel, so that's great. Would be great to welcome you on the website. Cool. All right, so let's go back to the actual feedback of Faris. Sorry for waiting, but I just quickly wanted to answer those smaller questions. And let's go. So again, no title screen, no problem, but that's what we see here. Here, okay, yeah, this ship is very fast. Wait a minute, what was that? Effects and look depth reference. Don't put that in your reel. Nobody cares about your reference. If there are, I'm not sure if we talked before on Discord, and if we did, then I'm sorry if we had a misunderstanding. When I said it is common, or it can be done to put in references in your reel, I didn't mean look depth references. I meant references that you try to 100% one-to-one replicate. So this is something you should definitely take out. This has no place in your reel, because it doesn't tell me anything about your knowledge or your skills. So no point in that. Yeah, that is good. That makes sense as a breakdown. That as well, of course. Yep, pretty good. Maybe a bit too long, because I already got it. Same here, already got it. So cut away. And now the breakdown becomes a bit too long, simply because it covers basically half your reel. Yeah, okay, so you take one shot and really milk it. And I understand where that comes from, because probably you don't have many other projects. Totally, I understand that, but it is a bit problematic. Usually in a show reel, you should have at least 3 to 5 projects. Otherwise, you can't really call it a show reel. I mean, this is not bad quality. If you can keep up the same quality like that in the other shots, then I'm optimistic. But just one shot and then milking it to 1 minute is not a good idea. Usually people will tell you instantly, okay, we need to see more. We need to, be able to trust you with more than one project. So before we move on, let's actually go through this one by one. Again, the title screen is missing. Not a big deal, but just pointing it out. this here is problematic because it's not realistic. So this, not even a motorboat would be that fast. And I think what happened here actually, funnily enough, is that you used this as a reference, which is still, by the way, not as extreme as what you did. But this is a motorized modern ship. Sailing ships were not that fast. I mean, this looks like it's, I don't know, 100 miles per hour. The problem here is not that I find this personally not nice. The problem here is that your job is to replicate physical behaviors. And if you misjudge something so important about the movement of a ship, just the fact how fast a ship is problematic, because that is your job. Physics is your job, at least in terms of how it looks like. We're not physicians or physics, yeah, you know what I mean? We're not physics scientists, we are entertainers. So don't get me wrong, I'm not saying you have to be a specialist in physics, I'm not. But you need to have basic understanding about how do physics feel like. And this is way too fast, and that's problematic. That said, I really like stuff like the snow and the sails and all that. So the secondaries in the shot are great, but the main shot, weird. So this one also very problematic. I assume you created this reel before you watched the video, understandable. The showreel video on the website. But what I say in the showreel video is don't do title screens or how you say, transition screens. So this here is a complete waste of everyone's time. Don't do this. Unless maybe this is actually a simulation, but then make it a shot. Then make it a shot that you want to talk about if you want. But these, now the breakdowns are coming. That makes no sense, because people who watch show reels have no time. They want to have the content quick and focused so that they can decide as quick as possible if the person doing the reel is capable of being a junior artist. So this is a bad idea. I would highly recommend taking this out, because it's just wasting time. Again, we talked about this. A look diff reference has no place in a show reel. I wouldn't know a single case where this would make sense. This totally makes sense. I like this even, but the only problem here is you do too much of it. So you have one screen, a second screen, or sequence, third sequence, which is long, each sequence, fourth sequence, then the shot again, which is always a bit problematic. You don't have to show the shot again. Then you have another breakdown. So this is, I call it the fifth sequence, the sixth sequence. So yeah, so you have 6 sequences about one shot. That's you don't need to do that. Not more than 2 sequences make sense. And generally, like I said in the video, when you do breakdowns, they have to show something that are worthwhile for professional. And I'm not saying they're not, but it's too much. I mean, you could, those 2, for example, you could put into one sequence easily. Then this one might not be necessary actually, even though I would understand why you want to put it in. But you could integrate this into this. Yeah, integrate it into this. Maybe this is more important than, for example, this one. This one doesn't tell me much. This one neither. So maybe the ropes, put them as a part of the first element. This is nice, render layers, okay, but then you do not need another sequence showing the exact same thing. So here you show your layers basically again. What do I learn from this? What is the new information I can get out of this? And maybe a thought about this. A show reel is not a making of. So you are probably influenced by making offs from companies or movies, but that's not what a show reel is doing. A making of is supposed to kind of show off and entertain to an extent, but a show reel is supposed to sell your skill level, which is actually not the same. So yeah, too much fluff, and too much fluff of the same kind, and too few projects. So that's my main takeaway. Okay, so I hope I didn't forget anything. Let's see. So all I get from Faris is are okay. So I guess that was helpful. Again, for all of you guys, all 3 reels, by the way, were pretty good. There was none of them were crap, which is a good feedback. So again, all my feedback is in the best interest and goodwill. So I really hope it helps, and I feel like all 3 of you should not have any problems as long as you just keep going with the path you took so far. If you keep going what you're doing and keep improving, then I see no problem with your career. Just, yeah, there's nothing fundamentally wrong in any of the reels, but there's always, something you could improve, of course. So I don't see new videos, new questions, but I see a new video. So let's jump on that, and that is Jan Mattes wants feedback. Jesus, Jan Mattes, you could have feedback by just asking me directly, because we're basically friends, which I'm not saying officially, Jan Mattes. But anyway, so if you want to do it in public, so be it. It's your own decision. I can't help you if that is what you want. So let's put in your name correctly, Mr. Armbruster. Oh, now I have a problem. German. Always these German. Yeah, let's do it English, so be it. Because I have an English keyboard and a German keyboard, but I have to switch between them, so now I do the English version. So let's start with this one. So first of all, yes, because I know Jan Mattes, and he actually learned a few things here and there, small things from me. And one of them is how to do, in my opinion, a normal contact screen. So, I mean, I already told you what I think about your shot. So this is a great shot. I like it. I'm not sure what kind of feedback to give you. Maybe what was it that I gave you last time? I can't remember. So first of all of them have kind of context. This one a little less, but at least I kind of like the camera angle. So this is a good example of the least you can do in a shot. So this kind of effect, I mean, it doesn't feel like it's part of a movie because I'm lacking the background. In a movie, you wouldn't see a dark gray background. So, it instantly tells me, okay, show real piece, which is fine. But what's nice about this is a lot of people would just take a camera right in front of it. So just, aiming at it so that we can see something. But just the idea of lowering the camera to create some kind of cinematic effect of, this is big and scary, it doesn't need much, but I can tell if I see something like that, oh, this is something who understands the context of all this. The idea of a cinematic experience, even if it's, for commercials or TV, and I like that. Always try to improve it a little bit in terms of cinematic experience, and there's always a way of doing this. I love the detail here, very nice. Actually, interesting. This shot is, it seems, no, it's the same actually. It's lighting, I guess. This seems to have more detail than the other shot. Interesting. I don't know where it comes from, but it seems like it's losing detail. Don't know why. So moving on. Yeah, that's nice. It's a classical beginner shot. What I like is that it's small, but the amount of detail is relatively high. What I think could still be improved is what I'm missing here is a smoke. So if something in any way disappears in a glowing way, my assumption is always, okay, some kind of hotness. And even though I understand this is probably supposed to be a magical effect, I do believe adding a little bit of smoke here would help. Not the massive burning smoke, but these little details. Little like if you have, what picture do you have in my mind? Yeah, a simple match. Of the things that fly away, they create a tiny bit of smoke, which move around the space, which is always then looking nice. And then also the light here would probably illuminate the smoke, which I think would look very nice. Also here I absolutely believe the background could be filled with something to give it some kind of context. And yeah, I mean, Usually it's not super important that the shading is great because it's in effects real. I get that. The problem here I have is this is very gray and this is also very gray. So I would at least try to, you know, adjust the shading a little bit. So a little bit of metal and a little bit of leather here, and here maybe a bit of texture. It doesn't have to be a lot of work to kind of polish this a little bit. Personally, I'm always a big fan of that. It doesn't have to be, you know, super professional, but usually it should be easy to improve stuff like that with just a little bit of work of a day or two, right? And again, the background, the same. I don't like black backgrounds. If you can avoid it, try to avoid it. Oh, there was one small thing that bothers me. Sorry to pointing this out, but yeah, here. Those lines here, most people who watch the videos should know why I don't like that. This looks like a jittering problem or a sampling problem, or there was I'm always forgetting the best terms for this. So when basically the substeps are not enough. Maybe that's not what it is. I have to admit, maybe I'm just, you know, projecting here, but still these kinds of lines always suggest to an effects study that there is a problem with the substeps. So try to avoid them by all means, even if they're not actually coming from the simulation, because that's kind of, you know, it sticks out like a sore throat. Sore thumb, so you know what I mean. It just, you know, my brain instantly focuses on this. And then the good old Doctor Strange portal. Here, I mean, I already know those projects from Jan Mattis, so I'm just commenting about stuff that I already have commented on. So what I like here is the interaction with the environment. Again, this kind of portal, you know, was done a couple of times. And to be honest, personally, I'm not a massive fan of recreating effects that people have already seen in movies, because I feel like it's always more interesting, and I find artists always more interesting that show a certain level of creativity coming up with their own ideas. Just copying an effect from a movie, personally, I always find a bit boring. But anyway, what I like about it is that it reacts. Where was it? So here. There. Here you can see the glow on the environment. I would probably push this a little bit, because even though I can see it's there, and in this regard, it was great to see that, to understand, oh, look, the indirect illumination is, oh, actually it's a direct illumination, is there. But in the end, I don't see it anymore. It's gone. So I would probably change that. And also the effect itself is not the only thing we see, but we see some kind of context, which again is always something I appreciate. So yeah, it's, let me count. There's something I don't like about it. I think it's the amount of shots. 3, 4. Yeah, so I felt it right. I could feel that there was something missing, and it's the fact that it's only 4 shots. So 5 shots usually is what I recommend. When I said the minimum, I meant the absolute minimum is 3 to 5. Under that, there's no point in showing it, in my opinion. But personally, I would always prefer 5, at least if you can, to make it really shine. I think the problem I have a little bit with it is that I feel it could be more polished. And what I mean by that is I think this shot is pretty polished. So it has a lot of details here. The first shot obviously is very polished because it has lighting and shading in it. But the two in the middle, like I said, they feel a bit too grayish to me. And basically you're showing that you can do polish. You know what polishing is. So I would think about adding this to those 2 shots as well. Otherwise it feels a little bit less good as it could be. I absolutely believe from what I've seen that you could do more with this shot. And this is what I don't like about it. And again, actually, no, before I say it, no, I actually saw it. I was about to say add smoke, but there is smoke, sorry. So well done, yes, interaction with the environment and smoke. Exactly, those secondaries are always good. Yeah, I would say it's from the excitement level, I would say it's in the middle. There's nothing that really excites me, to be honest, because it's all very solid. But if I would have it on my desk, I would probably put it in the yes, but it would be in a bigger pile of other people. And I think that's because, again, the two shots in the middle are not polished in terms of what's around it. It lacks the really impressive stuff. I mean, this is, again, very solid, but there's no wow shot. And again, I would have at least 5 to really kind of, finish it. That said, apply with this. So this is not a shot where you should not apply with. Definitely send it out if you probably already you probably already did that. Whenever I say you can improve a reel, that doesn't mean you should not try to apply with it in a company. So as soon as you have something where you feel it doesn't have massive problems, like maybe just one shot, that would be too few, then you should always apply to get used to it, because the thing is, you cannot apply too many times. And I always explain that. Imagine you're a company and you get an application with a reel once a year for 3 months, for 3 years straight, or maybe twice a year for three years. And you can see that whoever applies is always getting better. First of all, just the fact that someone applies so often at a company, sooner or later you will invite that person, because you want to know why they want to work at this company so much. At least there's a good chance that they will. And secondly, when they improve whenever they bring in a new reel, that shows a recruiter, oh, this person is getting better and better and has the drive to improve. So basically, my opinion is you cannot lose anything by applying. The worst thing that can happen is that they ignore you, and then it's the same as if you wouldn't have applied. So that's, I think, is true for all of the 4, with one exception, unfortunately, that's the one of Faris, simply because it's just a single shot. Not a bad quality at all, but just a single shot is probably not enough. But the rest of you guys, if you feel the need for some reason to apply, you could do this already. But if you still have time, there's always something to improve. So, and then Nicholas Chan, or Chen, sorry. So let's do that. I mean, I think it's great that so many people ask for feedback. And then I think that's the last one in terms of reels. And then I might answer a few questions if there are still some. But where is it? Chen, yeah, of course. There you go. But this one I want to look at as well. So classical proper contact sheet, pretty good. Very big, but to be fair, not a bad execution. Oh, that is nice. That's well done. I like that. Well, that's pretty good. Yeah, okay. Let's watch it at least once. That's not the same quality. I think that needs more improvement. But the first project for sure is pretty good. It's nice, but could also add something. That is nice. I like that one. That's also nice in terms of shading. That's a nice execution as well. So a lot of good stuff here, that's for sure. Yeah, that makes physically no sense, but it's funny. So, oh, and then all of a sudden it was over. Okay, let me quickly talk about the very end. So first of all, I would again end with your contact data, not with, it's over suddenly. This one, yeah, I mean, you can keep it in, but it's more like a fun effects experiment. It's up to you if you want to keep it in or not. It's not as good as the rest in terms of polish. And this is something, if you watched my video, that I find very problematic. And funnily enough, considering that you have such high quality in the rest of the shot, this is probably your weakest shot so far, because the main problem here is it stops very sudden, which tells me, oh, probably this was too resource heavy, so the person couldn't finish it on time because it was simply too much machine time that you have to spend on it, which is exactly the reason why I do not recommend doing these kind of shots. I would throw this out even if it would be, 2 or 3 times longer. It's not bad in its execution per se, but it's those classical office building distractions that I simply, when I watch it, ignore. And this particularly has a problem of being too short. So this should die. I don't think it makes a lot of sense in your reel. It's good that you started with your strongest shots. They are great. Okay, yes, they are also just a copy of existing material, which I personally find a bit boring. That said, the execution is really good. I really like that. So much detail. The level of detail is always what I'm looking for. And there's so much detail in the shading, in the lighting, in the elements. You can tell this is not just one layer of effects. Those are multiple layers on top of each other. You can feel that. Yeah, there you can see it. Then the lightning and all that, which illuminates the shot. Great, absolutely great. I'm a big fan of the shot. This is the kind of shot that is a great example of a great effects shot for a junior or mid-size, because it is big in the background, but the foreground stuff is not too big. You can handle this. It's not a city per se, and the background you can get away with lower resolution, but it has lighting in it, it has a cinematic feeling in it, it has a camera shakes in it. It's great, I love it. This I don't understand. I would leave this out. I can see it's a custom velocity field for the dust clouds, fair enough. But the picture itself doesn't tell me much. You should integrate this maybe into this or something. So this, yeah, I can see it's made of multiple elements. You could tell that from the shot itself. So this makes sense to quickly show it. This one is definitely weaker because it's also much bigger. I think that's part of it. But here, the smoke is not realistic in the way it disappears way too quickly, and it lacks the detail this scale would need. I think it's not that far away from looking great, but I would probably touch this shot again, adding more secondaries, thinking about filling this void up here. I know this has nothing to do with effects, but you could kind of fill this with some kind of effect, or even if there's just a moon or something here. But from a cinematic framing point, this is not particular. I mean, this is kind of something is missing. No, I wouldn't say it's bad, but there's something missing. And here the effects, you can tell the detail on the smoke is missing. It's too thin, in my opinion. And here the effects of the impact, there could happen way more than this. So you could add smoke. I would expect a bigger reaction, and also maybe some kind of reaction of the vehicle itself. It could be dented. It could move a little bit. So the idea is always, if you do something, even if it's something small, like, something shoots at something else, think about how can you really milk this? What kind of elements can you add to this to really make it feel great? So for example, if this gets an impact and there's something shaking or moving a little bit, that seems like a small thing, but it would add so much to the feeling of the impact. And it would tell me that even though it's not hard to do, it tells me that you understand what it's about and that you are willing to do small things, knowing that they have a big impact of the overall result. So the embers themselves are actually pretty good. They have a high detail to it, I would say. But the smoke is lacking detail. Again, there could be more happening, and also more embers in the first place. So it's kind of it's in the right direction, but I feel you stopped too early. You could spend way more time in finessing this. This one, I'm not impressed by it, but it's not, at the same time, it's not per se a bad shot, so I'm wondering what it is. I think because the effects themselves are so secondary to the shot that I wonder if it's really an interesting effect shot to show. So for example, if this would be a shot that I, let's say, worked on the actual Mandalorian, I would still not be sure if I would put it on a reel, because it basically just shows too little of the actual effect. So yes, absolutely, cinematic context, I think, is important. But if the cinematic context is more important in the end than the actual effect, then I would be careful with putting it on the reel. yeah, breakdown, nothing more to say about. Maybe make it more readable. It's a lot of black. You know, you can see the effects themselves or the information here feel like really low. So maybe zoom in or cover more of your space. It feels like, okay, what am I looking at? This is so small, I can't really read much out of it. So that's my biggest problem with this. There's, by the way, nothing wrong in your breakdowns to cut off part of your shots so that you concentrate more on what it's actually about. Okay, and I have to finish this. So this is interesting because this is basically one of the examples I always give. Try to do something small, but do it really, really well. And I can see that this was your idea here. And I can absolutely appreciate that. But I think you have to push it further. So I can now see that there is smoke, but the smoke is not that obvious to see. And I'm not sure about the framing here. In this case, I would actually make sure that you see more of the top so that you also can see the smoke more, so the actual effect. And then, even though, to be honest, I can't tell you what it is that is missing for me, I would need to think about this a bit more. But it's clearly CG to me. There's still something you could improve. And I think the best thing here is to look for some references of real cases like that. What you could improve. It's not bad. Don't get me wrong. It's solid work, but I would think about, I would think about how I could polish this so that it's really impressive. And currently it's not there yet, but it's a good start. It's not per se something I would take out. I think I would just keep working on it. Yeah, think about secondaries, think about adding more to it. This is great. I don't know what you did here, but this looks super lighting wise. And actually, I know what you did. You'd add volumes. So a lot of volumes in here, and this gives it a very cinematic look. Great. I love it. I'm not sure if the fire is particularly great in terms of effects, but the way you present it in the context of a shot looks very realistic to me. And that's almost as good as if the effect itself would be perfect. Because you basically showed it the way it's supposed to matter in the context of a shot. This is nice, even though I have to say I find the movement a bit stiff, so it doesn't impress me. I like the idea as a concept for an FXTD, even though that's usually not something you do as an FXTD. That's more for creature effects maybe. So it's not a necessity to have something like this in. But if you do this, I would polish the movement a little bit. I like the environment, it's great, it's a great context, but then the breakdown kind of takes out a little bit of impressive result for me, because this actually looks not that impressive. It lacks the feeling of how a real animal would walk, because there is no bending of any kind of extremities. And this is something where, yeah, well, that's not convincing, let's say it this way. This, even though it's just a practice piece, which you can see, for example, because it's lacking the background, this is really well executed, I have to say. The shading, the wet maps, the white water, really well done. So this is an example where I would say, okay, it looks like a practice piece, but it's so well executed that I would still have nothing to criticize on it. So this is great. Maybe you could go closer, maybe, and lose a little bit of the void here. But then again, you would lose it down here. Yeah, I get it. So yeah, this is, yeah, I think you could criticize parts of this, I guess. But personally, I find it very impressive. And I would say this is one of the strong shots besides the other ones. So overall, a pretty good reel. Take away the last two, I would say. And again, maybe something, yeah, and then this one would be the last one. I think that's a good idea. Keep this one as the last one. Add your contact sheet at the end. Because again, the best in the beginning, which you have, then the middle parts with the good stuff, and then the best pieces, some of the best pieces again at the end. This is usually a good idea. And this one is really good. So I would keep it at the end. And yeah, and the rest I think is a good decision in terms of where you put it. Yeah, I would throw away for sure the last two. I think they're watering down the quality of your reel. Okay, so that took a long time, but that's all the thoughts I had. Hope this is helpful in some kind of way. So sorry, Krishna, I don't have time to look at this. Wait, no, Krishna, I actually, oh, did I? Oh, I'm sorry, no, I skipped you. Did I? Sorry. That's not okay. Damn it. Okay, because I skipped you, I will put it in now. I actually didn't want to, but that's not fair. That was my fault. I'm sorry, I apologize. That was my fault. Sorry. So here is your time now, only for you, Krishna. So yep, contact sheet, just like it should be. Yeah, you know what I'm going to say. Be careful with the scale, with the big projects. This is solid, yeah? Maybe a bit more detail in the smoke. This is a bit too fluidy, too yeah, too viscous. Yeah, that's not bad. That's nice. Maybe a bit too fast. Yeah, so what I like about this, it's short, but it's on the point. So this is actually something I would expect from a junior. There's no unnecessary fillers, no fluff, no time wasting. So this is good. It is still a bit short, but that's for good reasons. So I like that. I'm not a massive fan of the beginning shot. And first of all, because of the scale, the effect itself is actually not bad. It has a lot of detail in it, but the lack of context is a bit off-putting to me. So what would I recommend? I think the best thing I would recommend is try to somehow add some background, like some sky or something. I think I understand what your problem here is, and that is one of the reasons why big shots like that are not a good idea. Now that you have this massive shot of basically an environment, you have to fill this with something. And your decision was, okay, to have at least something instead of black, you put a wall behind it. And I understand that. But there is some kind of missing context of this because of it. Again, it's not a bad shot per se, but it kind of reminds me too much of a classical junior reel, if that makes sense. So I'm not sure what to make of it. I don't want to criticize the shot too much because again, the effects are pretty good and really high detail, which matches with the scale. But if you ignore this part here, I don't know what it is, 20% of the screen, then everything else screams too simple. Does that matter? I think that depends on the recruiter. If the recruiter says, I don't care about this, if the shot itself, the effect itself is high detail enough, then I'm fine. I'm not sure. And I think I will keep it at that. It's not an obvious good or bad. I'm not sure. So this one is better because it has a background, even though it's probably footage. And I think you should consider doing the same for the shot before. I think it would work better for you. Again, the problem here is two things. I think this lacks a little bit of detail in the smoke for the scale you have. And also it feels too slow to me, which of course probably comes from the scale, but it still feels off. So if I would look at a reference, for example, of a helicopter, let's quickly do this actually. Just to understand what I'm talking about, it's not just a personal feeling or opinion. This is based on a little bit of experience from references. So let's see if we can find this as quickly as possible. I was looking for helicopter wash because that's usually what you call this. But I found a washing a helicopter shot. So let me quickly, I'm sorry, I hope it doesn't waste too much of everyone's time, but I think it's worth finding this one maybe. What does anybody know how to call this? Down thing wash, down wash, down draft wash. Where is it? Shit. Down wash, I think it's called. Yeah. So it's something with wash. I remember in English. Again, English is my second language, so apologies. Here, let's take this one. I think this one is good enough for our needs here. So this guy's landing. And here it's still slow. Yeah, okay, I agree. But is it actually landing? It's not landing. Damn it. But when it's very close to the ground, it should have much more movement because, you know, obviously the speed increases the closer you are to the ground. So maybe this one? It's too far away to judge this. And from this distance, it looks like the same speed. Okay, I'm sorry, I can't find a good reference. I don't have, you know, every reference I have in mind on my disk always available. This one I don't have a reference for. But from my gut feeling, okay, I feel like the speed of the smoke is not fast enough. It feels like underwater because of that. I think it has to be faster. And what's important here is not just to have something that looks good in terms of shading and framing. It also, like we had with the ship, it needs to be reasonable it has to feel correct, let's say it this way. There's a word for it. It has to be plausible, that's the word. It has to be plausible in the context of the world we know. And I feel that is too slow, and that puts me off. And I think even the same detail level with a higher speed and more turbulence would feel still better because it's more plausible physically. This one is nice, I kind of like it. It's just a nice shot just by itself. But in terms of the effects, it's not... It doesn't tell me much, let's say this way. It's like, it doesn't look like you did anything wrong or, you know, like you missed something or you don't understand what you're doing. But at the same time, it's so motion blurred and so fast that I'm not sure if I could judge your knowledge or your capabilities on this shot. That said, I like the shot. It's just very nice in terms of, a cinematic experience. And this is why I really like it. But as an effects shot, it's just not telling me much. Yeah, this one, yeah, the problem with this is the problem I have with this is I know how painful it is to create clouds. So I kind of feel with you, Krishna, how much resources you probably needed to create this. And the shots that I have in my show reel are not much better than that. I have to be completely honest here. This I don't think it's much better than what you're showing here. But nonetheless, I think it is better in terms of it looks a bit more realistic. I still not super happy with the shot because it's not as realistic as you would actually believe it to be real. But this one, I think, in terms of shading and detail level and levels of density, it's obvious to me that it lacks believability. And again, it's hard for me to tell you that because I know how painful it is to create those clouds. But you know, stuff like, okay, if you have a light here, then the shading through these clouds would look different. So this seems like a comped lighting to me. And a little bit what this would look like, again, it's hard to compare the two, but here the light from a back would blow this area out. So yeah, again, if someone says, well, your shot doesn't look much better, Christian, I tend to agree. But at least it has the elements that it needs to be more believable. And that is more complexity in the colors and overall shading. So for example, the darks are less dark, which is very important for clouds. And when you look at the densities, there's more variation between soft clouds and more sharper clouds, let's say it. And this is, I think, what's lacking here. And this is why I'm not a massive fan of this shot. I think it's one of your weakest ones. And I think if you want to have something like that, add something to it or improve it. Yeah. But overall, so how many shots do you have? You have 1, 2, 3, 4. So you have the 4-shot problem again, where I wouldn't say it's bad of too few. That would be nonsense. 4 is not too few, but at the same time, make it 5. You know, with 5 usually it feels like, okay, this is a proper show reel. This is a not, you know, an almost done show reel, but a proper show reel. Don't ask me why I feel like that, but I always felt like that. All my own show reels I only considered them finished, even though they never finished, of course, when I had at least 5 projects. Don't ask me why, it's just a feeling. 5 just feels like, okay, this person has enough experience. This person has 5 shots in their reel. So that feels like a good idea. Okay, so I think that was necessary because Krishna absolutely deserved that feedback as well. So let's now, after about an hour of not looking at the chat, let's see what people asked. If you had any questions besides that, otherwise it's time to finish this actually. Nostos asks, are you planning to make another course like an advanced course? Not in the way that, so first answer, yes, but not in the way that the website is, because that is way too much work. I can't do 400 videos with advanced material, no way. But what I'm thinking about is actually doing those classical advanced courses where you can, you know, buy one topic, one tutorial with, I don't know, I'm thinking about something like 5 to 10 hours of material of advanced knowledge. But of course, as soon as you go into advanced, a part of me always thinks like, is this good enough? Is this actually interesting enough? Which I think is nonsense, because a lot of the things I could tell are probably really helpful. But, you know, psychologically, it's really hard for me to do an advanced course because you always question yourself, obviously. But yes, I'm planning to do that. When it comes to lighting and rendering, that's another thing I really would like to do. But this is such a massive topic that it's an endless pit of stuff. I actually, some of you might know this, I actually started to do a lighting and rendering course just like this one with a separate website for Houdini, and I had to stop it. It was just an unbelievable amount of work, and I realized I can't do this. So in how I could ever integrate lighting knowledge into work, I'm not sure. Maybe probably what I would do is the tutorial that was just talking about one project that is closed in itself would probably at least have 1/3 of it purely about the shading and the lighting. And I think that would be a good way of doing this. And actually this is planned for this year, but I don't want to make any promises. That's just, you know, a plan I have. It's not a promise, it's a plan, not the same thing. So yeah, we'll see. But this will not happen in the next couple of months. If anything, it will happen in something like 6 months or something. So in the middle of the year, maybe. And if I say that, that probably means at the end of the year. So what else? Sorry, I'm going through all the questions here, so to see if there's anything that I really want to answer. Apologies. Maybe I'll just speak out loudly so that you don't have to look at me reading, which is boring. Faris says, thank you. My pleasure. Hope this is helpful, man. Nicholas, yeah, that's true. I like how you each other congratulate or appreciate the quality of the show. I love that. Be nice to each other. It's always good. Thank you for being so nice to each other, guys. I really appreciate that. Yeah, if Nicholas would do a beginner course, you would, Jan Mattis would buy it. Cool. So great job, guys. Keep it up. Yeah, my opinion as well. Thanks for reviewing. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, cool. So I think that's it. Patreon, yeah, I'm not a big fan of Patreon, mostly because I tried that with Houdini blueprints and it was not working for me. So yeah, I think I didn't miss anything big. So thanks very much for joining and being so active. A bit longer this time, which is always happening when the crowd is good. So maybe let's finish with a bigger picture of mine. As people pointed out, they want to see that. Oh, and I can't do it. I can't do it. Come on. Now I can do it. There you go. So just for the goodbye, thanks very much everyone for joining, and the next one will at some point in 2 weeks. I'm not promising it's exactly in 2 weeks, But I think it's working quite well. So let's keep doing this regularly. So thanks very much. Have a nice weekend. And